All right, guys, welcome back to the Church Debater and Preacher Mike. Mike, what's going on?
Man, everything's been happening. Like you, I was gone all last week. You were gone a bunch, but I came home to rest after being with grandkids for a week.
Oh man,
Oh,
we've got all our bunch coming over Saturday, so that'll be
okay.
fine.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right, so we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a question to start with from our buddy Kent today, who we've had on the show before.
Yeah.
And I think it will lead us in several different directions.
Okay.
So here's this question. What's the
All right.
difference, or is there a difference between a preacher, a pastor, and an evangelist? And what title does the Bible give to a person in charge of a church?
Oh my goodness.
That's the title. Is that the title? Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I think that is a very timely question.
Okay,
It
good.
is a wide across the board question, one I've been asked many times. So I like it. Now, is there a difference? Well, when I look at them in our language, a lot of churches, there's not much difference. But if you look at the original, that is the Greek language, you get some different concepts. So for instance, preacher is a word that is used to talk about speaking a message.
How often do we see that word in the Bible?
You know, I know the word is keruxo, but I'm not sure exactly how many. I can be looking at it while we're talking, but
It's
I'm
not
not
a
sure.
bunch though, is it? It's
Not
not a
much.
whole lot.
No,
Yeah.
not much. It's more about proclaiming a message.
Okay.
Evangelist is literally the word good news. Evangelizo, it's a word that we use primarily to talk about one who preaches the good news in an evangelistic way. That's how we think of it.
Throw the word minister in there too. He didn't mention that, but throw that one in there too.
Sure. Minister is a common word in the Greek for a deacon, the word diakonos, meaning a servant. So in my work, people have asked, what are you called? Well, I don't want to be, and you've heard this many times, I don't want to be the minister, because every member is a minister in some point. I am the preacher. I'm the one that delivers the sermons. And the idea of being an evangelist certainly is a part of what I do, but others can do the same thing by preaching the gospel to people who need it.
Is it one who evangelizes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So then all of us should be that, male and female.
Yep, absolutely. I got no problem with that at all. Yep.
All right.
But when you throw the word pastor in there, it's been a word used for the particular work that I do by many churches. I don't use it for me because the Bible never uses it in that way. In Scripture, that term is used to identify those who lead a local congregation.
Okay. Give us that verse if you don't mind. What verse is that?
There are 3 or 4 that we could use. One would be 1 Peter chapter 5, where Paul, or Peter that is, in 1 Peter 5, said that he was an elder, verse 1, and he is shepherding the flock, and those people who shepherd the flock are supposed to be overseers. Now, the word itself for pastor is the word that is used for a shepherd, one who shepherds the sheep. So, also Acts chapter 20 is another great passage to use to talk about that concept. But the idea is that a pastor is one who is the shepherd of the sheep. That's the idea. And that's how it is used in scripture. So the next question would be, is a pastor ever a preacher?
Okay, hang on to that one. Hang on to that one first.
Sure.
Is the word, because the word pastor wasn't in the verse you read, is the word pastor properly used anywhere in the Bible, or would a more correct translation always be shepherd?
I know if you look at Ephesians chapter 4, and you'll notice that at least in the English, there is the word pastor is used there where God put in the church in a certain order. It's Ephesians chapter 4. Let's see, verse 11. He gave some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Now, the word used there for pastors, and that would be verse number 11. That word, he talks about evangelist, shepherds, poimen. Pastor and shepherd are the same term. So when you talk about pastor or you talk about shepherd, you're talking about the same thing. The Greek word is poimen.
So it really is someone who leads the sheep.
It is one who leads the sheep. That's exactly right. And in Acts chapter 20, where I was going to go a moment ago, in Acts 20, you actually have all three of those terms referencing the men that Paul called together. And in Miletus, verse 17, he called them elders. And in verse 28, he said, take heed to yourselves and the flock over which the Holy Spirit made you overseers. That's another word, bishop. And then to shepherd, poimen, or pastor the church.
Okay. All right. Now finish your thought about, can a preacher be a pastor or whatever?
Sure. Absolutely, a preacher can be a pastor, but the qualifications that we understand for those who are the leaders of the church, called elder, bishop, and pastor, fit the qualifications as defined in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus chapter 1. And in those passages, the qualifications for one who would be a pastor would knock out some preachers, either who aren't married, because that's one of the qualifications, who are so young not to have children, which is one of the qualifications, or whose children are so young that they are not Christians, which is another qualification.
Okay.
That's the way I understand scripture, and that's how we use that term. Therefore, I am not the pastor, nor am I a pastor, because I choose not to serve in that capacity. I just don't want to do it. I know friends of mine who are the local preacher and who serve as one of the pastors or elders or shepherds, but I choose not to do that.
Right. And I've been part of a church that the preacher has been chosen as an elder as well. So, so then, since you would not classify yourself as a pastor, what if somebody just came up to you and said, are you the pastor of the Church of Christ? Would you go through the trouble of having this discussion with them, or would you just say yes?
No, I have a guy who calls me once a week and he says, hello, pastor. And I say, how you doing? It's not worth getting into that big a discussion. No. If, however, that person was a member of the Richmond church, I'd have a conversation with them.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Or if they were thinking about being a part of our congregation, I would let them know right fast that this is how I see things. So,
all right. So you in no way lead our church.
The way you phrase that.
You knew I was going to do this.
Oh yeah, I did. But see, here's the freaky thing about it. Just by the fact that we're doing this podcast means that even you are leading. So I would say that in many ways I lead, absolutely. And in many ways, different people lead. Leading is an individual thing and takes on many different forms.
Okay. Should you ever be someone who makes a leadership decision for our church?
Again, it would depend upon what you would mean by a leadership position or leadership decision.
Okay, I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Do you go to the quote elders, bishops, pastor, shepherd, whatever you want to call them?
Yep.
Do you go to their decision-making meetings?
Yes.
Are you ever part of that decision?
Not as a decider, but as an advisor. When they ask me a question, I give my advice. Yes.
Do you think there's ever situations where, and I would guess that most preachers go to elders meetings, whether they're an elder or not, but
be surprised.
would you guess that there are some churches in which I don't know, dynamic's not the right word. I was going to say where the preacher's so dynamic that in effect, the elders let them make decisions.
Oh, I'm sure that happens all the time.
Right.
But I think that happens in more ways than one. I mean, I think there are places where the elders' wives actually run the show just by pushing things, or the youth minister has so much support that he gets things done and pushes things that maybe they wouldn't want to do, but because they don't want to lose the support. So I think those kinds of things absolutely do happen.
Okay. But would you agree with the fact that a preacher, unless the name went before the congregation and became a pastor, that a preacher should not be making the elder meeting type high level decisions to lead the church?
I do agree with that. Yes.
Okay. So then, what do you think? I guess if we're so adamant that a preacher should not be called a pastor, that pastors only reserved for elders, why don't we use the word pastor more often for our elders?
Well,
and don't say shepherd. Why don't we use the word pastor? Because that's the word that is through all religious, not all religious, a lot of Christians type religious organizations. There is very few that don't use the word pastor, maybe not totally scriptural based, but they use pastor in some way, but it's almost like we're afraid to even use the word, even if we use it correctly.
I think that there would be nothing wrong with using the word. I think sometimes we're better off avoiding terms that already have a reputation that is hard for people to understand when there's just as good an
alternative. Not really a negative reputation, though. It's not a negative reputation.
Not negative, but it's
just incorrect.
Yeah, it transmits a message that the religious world equates pastor with preacher, not with elder, because a lot of churches don't even have elders.
Right.
So that's why I opt for the exact same term, synonymous term, shepherd. And for another thing, pastor is not as image producing as shepherd. We understand
that's
what
true.
A shepherd is. And
yeah,
so
that's
I think
true.
People see it better, maybe. But would it be okay to use them? Yeah, absolutely. Our pastors, we have 5.
Okay. Let me bring up 2 things. One's kind of a joke that's happened in the last 2 days. The other one's not. Yesterday in Bible class, the Bible teacher asked you specifically, pointed you out, and said, do you think that Jesus overthrew the money changers' tables twice, not just once. He thought it was twice. For the record, I think it's twice. You think it's twice. That's what you said.
Yes.
Then he said to you, now we've got the authoritative decision. It sounds like a leader, sounds like a leadership role to me, Mike.
Well, you know, when you've been right so many times, people just sort of.
And then today, what do you told me you had to go to, you didn't have to go, but
Right.
You went to a preachers meeting today. What do preachers meetings do? What do preachers do at preacher meetings?
We talk bad about elders.
Do they lead in any way? Talk about elders.
We talk bad about elders. That's what we and members who are troublesome members. You know, we sit around and talk about them. But no, you know, preachers there are all kind of support groups in the world for different things. We are a support group for each other. We all know what each other has been or is going through. We are constantly giving ideas back and forth about how things are done and how we can help each other. We do in-depth study. We have a book review. We just have those kinds of things that preachers serve with each other to resource and network. It's a great support.
Do you ever have discussions there with the idea we're all going to go back to our elders and suggest this is the way we should go?
We have many times found things that we go back with our various elderships and say, here's what we found. We like this. This is a great idea. Many things through the years have come up. In fact, today, one of the questions came up and I happened to make a statement, and this young preacher goes, now, wait a minute, stop. I'm going to write this down. I like this. I like what y'all are doing. And he was talking about how to have an orderly period of worship on a Sunday by him being able to welcome, if you will, without using sermon time to do it. He made a statement. He says, we have our sermons online. He says, if people stop after 4 or 5 minutes of listening, they're not going to get anything because I spend that first 4 or 5 minutes welcoming and saying hi. And I say, right. I never do that. And they, what do you mean? I said, when I get up to preach, whether I'm here visiting, doesn't matter. My first words are not thank you for letting me come or glad to see you. My first words are a hook to say, this is what we're going to talk about. I want to talk for a minute. And so what I said was, at Richmond, I always am the first one up on Sunday to welcome everybody and say hi and tell you what's been going on and give a quick report. And he's writing all this down saying, okay, I can see how we can do this. So yeah, we share things like that back and forth all the time.
But you don't go back to the elders and say, listen, here's what we need to do.
Oh, no. Not in a way that says we all have voted and now you're going to do what we tell you to do.
All right.
No.
All right.
No, I recognize the chain of authority there very well. I don't even want it.
Let's then stay with the elders or the shepherds.
Okay.
And talk about this, and you're going to know why I'm bringing it up. And I'll get to that here in a moment.
Yeah.
Should our elders make every decision for our church financially?
Oh, if we ever get to a point where every decision is made financially, then we've not made it by faith.
Good.
However, if you make it by faith without ever considering the financial, you're also not being a good steward.
Where'd you get that?
Well, first.
How do you know? Let me read this first of all. Let me just start with Judges 7.
Okay. Verse
7. And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men who laughed, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand and let all the others go, every man to his home. Mm-hmm. So the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300. And the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. That same night, the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp. We know I won't read the whole story. We know from that story that God was with them, and that small group ended up, I don't want to say winning, but I'll say winning because they had God on their side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's go to Hebrews 11.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost there. Trust me. All right. Hebrews 11. I'll go down to the names. So I'm going to start with verse 4. By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen. By faith, Abraham obeyed and was called out. Abraham was going to kill his son.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a financial decision, but it's a lot worse. You really have to have faith to do that. So let's start with this. How do we know not building a fellowship building is going to be held against us for our lack of faith? And I'll set it up in this way. I tried to find churches in our area and other areas, and you'll probably know this better than I will, that built a building like that and then did not grow. So isn't there a time when we have to take that leap of faith and do what we may be uncomfortable with the idea that God will help us through that? That was a long question, wasn't it?
Yes, but it was very clear. I understand exactly. And I agree absolutely with the sentiment. In fact, the whole decision to build in the first place was a decision of saying, this is what we think God wants us to do. Number two, there has to be, and I would call to mind 1 Corinthians 4, verse 2. Moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. Stewardship of God's possessions. That's why we're here. Everything we have, everything here is God's, and we are managing it. We're stewards.
Let me say one thing about stewardship. To me, stewardship for me individually would be gambling or drinking my money away that I should be using to provide for the family. Isn't that stewardship? That has nothing to do with evangelism. This does.
Well, I would think that stewardship has to do with anything that God has placed into our care. And the responsibility of those who have that care, that stewardship, whether elders, preacher, members, everything fits into it, even evangelistically, because when you start down a road, there comes a time at which absurdity kicks in. What if instead of the idea of the funding required, instead of coming back 1.5 million more than we were intending to spend, had come back 5 million more? Would we then say, you don't have enough faith to go 5 million more? So I think,
isn't that kind of what happened when we built the building we're in right now? Because the prices went up because I think there was a big hurricane or tornado that we were recovering.
It went up some, and they had the idea of, yes, this is worth going that much. I think it's a balancing act where people have to say, okay, we know that we have to have faith in God, but we also can't just have blind faith. This leap of faith into the dark is not what God calls us to. So while I am disappointed that we're not building, I understand the concept that stewardship says we're going to put it on hold, not that we're not doing it, but that we're waiting for a time when better use of the finances can take place. And
that's awfully subjective. It sounds objective, but that's awfully subjective.
It is subjective because some other group might have decided to do it. Some other groups might have decided never even to consider building the place. So it is very subjective. And that's back to the topic you brought up. This topic of those men who shepherd. Had there been 5 different shepherds instead of the 5 that we have, they might have built it.
True.
That doesn't mean these 5 are wrong. Yet there have been a third 5. They may never have even considered the concept. Right. So it is subjective, but God leaves us as people in the church to serve under those shepherds, to work through them. And that's their calling. That's why it's a very difficult work.
Did the elders make that decision based on a vote of the membership?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Wasn't it made right after the members' meeting?
No, they came to the meeting knowing that the likelihood was that this wasn't going to happen.
That's what I get for not coming to the meeting.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they knew what was happening. They knew what was about to happen, and they wanted to get the people prepared. What I liked about what was said, what Joe said, was he at least gave a statement that couches it in good terms. This might be God showing us that right now we need to go a different way.
How do we know it's not the opposite, though? How do we know we're not making the wrong decision?
Well,
I know that's their job, and I'll support whatever they decide.
Oh, I know that.
That's not at issue here.
Right.
But, I have not found any church situation. And of course, when I say church, I'm not just talking about Church of Christ.
Right.
I have not found any church situation yet.
Mm-hmm.
If they're out there, there's not very many of them. I have not found a situation in which the building was built and attendance went down. It always went up. Families, in some cases, families moved in because they knew the activities were going to be great for their family. I don't know. I support the elders. I'll say it. I just think it's the wrong decision.
Well, I think that it's a very difficult. I wanted to build as well, and I know, I have every confidence that we will build. I also think that the idea that came from them was their best understanding of managing this church, God's will, and balancing as best they could. And this is their for now decision, not their forever decision.
You have any gut feel? You have any gut feel for how many of the membership feel like I do that we should go ahead and build and
honestly,
let God be our be our leap of faith?
I hate
that phrase. That phrase sounds too movie-like.
Yeah, well, leap of faith, I don't think is the way we use the term. I don't think it's a biblical term for faith anyway. But the idea of how many, I think there are just as many, at least just as many, who are strongly thinking that there are quite a few who didn't want to build at all because of the finances.
Right.
There are some who strongly want to build because we can. And there are others who say, let's build, but not now because we can't right now. So I don't know that there is a way of saying there's a firm majority at all.
Do you think that changed at all after that meeting?
I think,
or was it pretty much people felt the same after the meeting as they did before the meeting?
I think that I can only say from my experience, I have had 2 or 3 express sorrow that we're not building, but many who said it's a wise choice not to build now.
And you feel like they would have felt that way even before that meeting took place?
No, because they didn't know how desperate the situation was or how intense.
How desperate is it?
Not financially, it's not on this end. On that end, when you're talking about, at least as I understand it, maybe $1.5 million more than we ever wanted to spend. I mean, it was just tough. And building stuff is so high right now. People who are in the building field are telling things that maybe next year they really believe things are coming down. Well,
Everybody,
okay.
all the bit.
A lot of them are, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And if that's the case, we revisit it next year. And here's the positive side. What if between now and then we do something else that we couldn't have done or wouldn't have done had we built? Maybe like hire somebody, maybe like build the classroom section.
Yeah,
maybe,
but
I don't know.
To me, hiring somebody, I know this is getting into accounting now.
Yeah.
Hiring somebody is a business expense.
Yeah.
Building a building is an asset. To me, that's two different pockets. It's still money in both cases, but one is an expense, one is an asset. Those two things are mutually exclusive, in my opinion.
I fully agree with you. I understand fully. Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we've gone over 30 minutes, so we probably better. I don't want to split the show up, though. I thought about that, and I said no. Then I think it's an interesting topic.
I think they'll stick with it because we're talking and of course we don't want to leave this online podcast with anything other than what you've already said. We support those men who shepherd this church.
Right.
We may not agree with everything that is said, but we support them and we're going to move forward.
Yeah. And I don't want to say requirement, but as a Christian, we're instructed to support them unless they're obviously doing something unscriptural.
There you go. That's right.
I guess I want, I'll say it like this. I want the church to grow so strongly that I'm disappointed because it kind of looks to me, the research I've done is that it's automatic. It's like Field of Dreams, man.
Wow.
If you build it, they'll come. I mean,
you know what? Maybe coming out of COVID, they're going to come and push us to build over the next few months.
All right.
I'd be in favor of that.
All right. Good deal. All right. You've given us an awful lot of profound thoughts, but do you have a profound thought to close us with?
My profound thought today would simply be when you are in a position where somebody else has authority over you, it's part of my job, part of your job to help them have an easier time of authority. Meaning, I'm going to do what I need to do.
Sure.
And I can handle that. I can do what I need to do under someone else's authority, and we can work together and move forward. And that's how, man, if our country would run that way.
Oh, man, you got that right. I'm not sure there will ever be another bipartisan decision ever made in this country.
I totally agree with you. 1,000%.
That's sad. All right.
It
certainly wasn't what our forefathers intended.
It was not. It was not.
All right. Sorry about the little political slant there at the end, guys. All right. That's it. We've put everybody to sleep. Nobody's even listening anymore, but that's it for Church Debater and Preacher Mike. Say goodbye, Mike.
Goodbye, Mike.